this whole group was brought together under the premise that there's so much work going on in weatherization, and we have so much more to do, and help us to set a goal, and then to that goal, get the funding in place to be able to achieve it. And the goal we set was this idea that by the end of this decade, we would have weatherized a total of 120,000 homes, particularly for low and moderate income Vermonters. The delta between what we've done and what we need to do is about 90,000. We hear, and I wanted to raise this because I think, we'd always been saying we have really high weatherization goals, but our group's sort of linking to this number has been really helpful for both the Climate Council and for the Comprehensive Energy Plan, of putting a number out there that we can actually start thinking about as the right number for 2030. And so it's been one of the things that our group has done really well, has really hammered the point that we've got a lot of work to do to catch up and meet our goals. And putting out this 120,000 total or 90,000 new homes by the end of the decade has really helped sort of galvanize that thought. We've come together as a large group of organizations. I won't go through this list because this itself is not comprehensive. From time to time, the group gets larger and smaller depending on what's going on. But one of the strengths of this group has been that we have a really broad coalition, from folks who are already doing weatherization work to new groups that haven't done it. I'm thinking of like VHFA in particular that have sort of did it in their past, but are doing it again now. So we've been able to bring new folks to this group. That's one of the power of this group. We separated our work into, as a reminder, into sort of a big coalition where we're meeting today, and then work groups that are working on different areas. There's the RAP group, there's technical approaches, weatherization workforce, and at different times, and we have grown the number of work groups and we've shrunk the number of work groups. So we've had a funding work group in the past, and we've had, which we don't have today, and we've had a comms work group we haven't had. So we can grow and shrink the organization depending on our needs. But this is where it stands today. So what have we done over this period? We had a really successful session, but as I was putting this deck together, Cara and I and Richard were reflecting on the fact that we've actually had a pretty successful couple of years. Now, I don't just stop and pause and say, we don't take credit for this. This is the work that's been building for decades before us, like around weatherization. We have sought through this Weatherization at Scale Coalition to help sort of pull the pieces together and be at times a support structure, at times a coordination arm, at times sort of somebody to push behind other people's work. But if you take a look at the entirety of the work that we've had a hand in, and I haven't even captured it all here, but we started this back formally in October of 2020. One of our first projects out of the gate was this on-bill financing idea. We were really looking at finding ways to add more money to weatherization, really focused on the funding part of this. And out of that effort grew this proposal to do a really comprehensive and new on-bill financing proposal with our great partner VHFA. That ultimately became known as RAP, the Weatherization Repayment Assistance Pilot, but the governor proposed that back in January, or the forerunner of that back in January of 2021, along with some other weatherization money. Eventually, that got pulled all together into a pretty good pot of money for weatherization, and not the budget that just passed, but the year before that. That included $9 million for the RAP project, plus more money for EVT. It had money for NeighborWorks. It had money for energy counseling and coaching. And this was and at the time, and still now, we think this was a really successful outing for us. We were able to get some sort of new opportunities in the pipeline for weatherization and build on that. At the end of the sort of in 21, at the end of that session, we started to think to ourselves, like, well, what else can we be working on? And this was at a time when the ARPA money was really coming into picture. Like we knew we were gonna have a lot of ARPA money. So we set out to really understand the magnitude of how much money we would need to to hit our 90,000 additional new homes goal. And that work was led by Ken Polito and others. And we came up with some really large numbers. I mean, I think if we recall, they're on the order of like 600 million, I think was the number, Ken. If you, I can't exactly, it was something on that. If you took all the money we were going to get, we knew we were going to get, and then what the gap was, it was like 600 million. So it was a pretty big number. And we met and we said, well, what do could we reasonably hope to get with the ARPA funding? What could we reasonably put on the ground, knowing that and getting feedback from all of you to say there's only so many contractors, qualified contractors, it takes time to ramp this up. Let's make a proposal for the ARPA money that is a realistic one. And that is what in October of 21, we proposed a $72 million in new funding, and a memo that I'll send this out. I've linked it here. All these resources are online. Around the same time, maybe a little bit before that, we also heard a pitch from Enrique about technical approaches. Like, are we doing enough we've been really focused on the money part of this, but are we thinking about how we're doing weatherization? And are there new approaches to be able to do that? So we spun up with Enrique's help, this technical approaches group that has been working through these challenges. So I think it's fair to say that our proposal got some legs. We're also helping the climate action plan through the Climate Council and the Comprehensive Energy Plan, who all put sort of funding proposals in. And through the work of Sarah Phillips at OEO and the team at the Public Service Department, the governor proposed $80 million in new weatherization funding. Pretty close to our 72 million. It was split. Most of it going to Office of Economic Opportunity, which makes sense for our lowest income Vermonters, and a big chunk of it going to Efficiency Vermont for moderate and market-based customers, our clients. This was part of a large sort of climate funding package, and we were really pleased that this made it all the way through. This money was in the budget that the governor signed last week, H740, I think, if I had that number right. So this money is now going to go into play, and I think it's one of the largest bumps in weatherization funding we've seen lately. So we know that's good, but I'll get to this in a second. It's not enough. It doesn't fulfill that big gap that we identified to meet our 2030 targets. So one of the things that we've been doing, you've been doing, and we've been helping with, is sort of chipping away at other funding sources. We heard from our congressional delegation a chance for congressionally directed spending. We're pleased that Senator Leahy included in his ask $8.5 million for clean heat homes, which is an effort to do weatherization, heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, and other make-ready work for electrification. And recently, building off the great work by EVT and OEO, Senator Sanders agreed to put in $1.75 million for a climate workforce training center. So we didn't stop at the legislature. We're trying to find some federal pots of money that exist out there. I would not say those are in the bank by any means. There's a long road to get congressionally directed spending actually across the line, but it's good that we have the attention of our federal delegation. So this is sort of a snapshot. This isn't even all the pieces. This is a snapshot of some of the things that we've been working on over the past couple of years. But the question that I put at the front of this is, where do we go from here? And I think that's where I want to turn to next. So we know one thing for certain is that despite all of our great work to get funding, we have not got enough funding. We need funding certainty for weatherization. And we know that with the money we have now, that's going to drop off after 2026. So there is definitely a need for us to be thinking about what that long-term funding for weatherization looks like. We know there's an opportunity to do some of that with the clean heat standard, but that's something that maybe to explore it a little bit more. But there's likely a need for a sort of dedicated funding source that provides certainty over a long period, which will allow the market to be able to grow and thrive. So that's one thing that's going to be next, but that's probably not the only thing. This is the last slide. So I wanted to just mention here for your consideration what the year ahead might look like for us. First up is that I think we want to bear in mind that it is going to be a dynamic year. No matter what, it's going to be a dynamic year. We have a lot of turnover in the legislature. We know at least one of our committee chairs, Representative Tim Briglin, not running for re-election. He's the House Energy Committee. A number of the committee spots in both chambers are not running again. So there's going to be a lot of turnover next year's legislature. And when there's that much turnover, a lot of folks are speculating there's going to be some ramp up time so that going into the legislature next year with another fully baked proposal, it might take them a little while to get speed on, like, what is weatherization? Why is it important? What do we need for this? So we'll bear that in mind as we think about our work plan for the next year. We're also looking, and afraid to say, but there's a possible economic contraction that exists out there. And will it be an opportunity to invest in climate, or will the legislators feel like they need to curb spending over the next year? So, and then there's persistent labor market and inflation pressure. We have known that for some time. We've been dealing with that, especially our practitioners who are on this call are dealing with that right on the ground. I mean, Dwight has been sounding that alarm for many, many months now about the workforce and inflationary challenges that threaten to erode our capability that we're getting with this new funding. So what about for us? What should we focus on? So this is for later, and we can come back to this slide if needed. But I wanted to just mention a couple things that have come up in conversations. One is what I just mentioned, thinking about a long-term funding mechanism for weatherization. Some folks have expressed a desire to look at weatherization and clean heat standard, or at that which is a bill that as folks on this call know didn't pass this year by the narrowest of margins, only on an override vote. But we think we'll be back next year in the coming years. How does weatherization play into a clean heat standard? Are we looking at weatherization support for renters? Tom Proctor, who was on this call before, raised that issue before. Should this be an area of focus? I think it came up at the EAN pre-summit. Are there new avenues for our technical approaches group? How can we help support the weatherization workforce, the climate workforce in general? And then are there other ideas? I mean, there's a whole universe of ideas of things we could focus on, but we'd like to hear your ideas on this. So at the end of today's meeting, we'll come back and talk about other ideas, and then Cara and I will put together a survey of all these ideas that we'll send to you in the early part of June. We'll ask folks to complete that survey, and we'll come back in August with kind of a clearer, I'm sorry, I said June.
July.
I meant July. I meant July. We're already halfway through June. So we'll come back in July with that. We'll send you that survey in July, fill it out, and then in August, we'll come back together and talk about kind of what that work plan is. So that's a bit of a wrap up. It takes into consideration both the last session and the previous session and all the good work that we were doing. One question I left off here, but is a fair question for debate is, should we keep this coalition going? I feel like there's a lot of value just by the fact I look around the table of who's showing up here. And I believe that itself speaks to the value that this has, but we also want to make sure that we're using folks' times wisely. And that means making sure that we have good agendas and good meetings and a good schedule, so that these meetings are truly productive for you and your teams and your constituencies that you meet with. So if we keep doing this, that's something that the planning team, the steering team are really focused on, making sure that this is a high value hour of your week or your month. Okay, I think I'm going to